What if your neighbor could pocket $1,000 just by accusing you of a crime you didn't commit? And what if during Trump's presidency he mobilizes the military for mass deportations, just like he promised?
Trump has repeatedly said that he plans to declare a national emergency and use the military to enact his mass deportations.
The truly terrifying twist under the mask's justification of American safety and the economy, states across America are introducing bounty laws that rely on an enticing financial reward and paying everyday citizens to act as enforcers.
From the First Alert for Missouri Capitol Bureau, lawmakers with ties to St. Louis are pushing new laws to create a bounty hunter program. It would pay people to turn in those they think are here illegally.
They created this weird vigilante system whereby anybody in the country, any random anti-abortion crusader, any nut anywhere, has standing automatically to sue anybody in Texas who abets a woman getting an abortion.
The brutal reality of these vigilante schemes is they pit neighbors against each other and leave families under constant suspicion. It's a recipe for chaos, ripping us right back to our darkest times, like the Salem witch trials all over again. At the time of making this video, Trump is just taking office again, so we'll see whether he'll truly tear immigrant families apart and plunge America back into its most shameful chapters.
Well, President-elect Donald Trump's threat to deport millions of immigrants is stirring fear in South Florida.
So there's a real palpable fear of uncertainty because all they know is that President-elect Trump has said there's going to be mass deportations taking place. They just don't know what that's going to look like.
It sounds like a dystopian nightmare, but that's exactly what America could turn into under Trump's promised immigration plan. So, are these immigration bounty programs really about safety? If $1,000 can buy your neighbor's loyalty or betrayal, just how safe are you?
Plan to deport everyone who is here illegally over the next 4 years.
Well, I think you have to do it. You have rules, regulations, laws. They came in illegally.
Day one, I will seal the border, stop the invasion, and we will begin the largest deportation operation in American history.
To understand how bad things could get, we need to open America's history book. Centuries ago, paranoid whispers turned into death sentences. You've probably heard the stories. 1692, Salem, Massachusetts, villagers accusing each other of witchcraft, leading to unjust trials and gruesome executions. At first glance, you might think this was mass hysteria and religious zealotry run amok. But if you look a bit deeper, you'll see that the real sin from the Salem witch trials was the fear of the devil used to justify deceptive financial gain. If someone was accused of witchcraft, local authorities could seize their land, livestock, or any other assets deemed tainted. Accusers might also profit indirectly by removing wealthy landowners who stood in their way. Money and vendettas, not just superstition, fueled the carnage. If you were thrown in jail, you or your family ended up footing the bill for your entire trial, imprisonment, and even the cost of your own execution. Certain officials practically built mini fortunes by raking in court fees, while neighbors happily scooped up confiscated property at discount prices. The madness only stopped when, finally, a powerful person felt the heat. Massachusetts Governor William Phipps's wife was accused, and suddenly the legal gears that had devoured so many so-called witches ground to a halt. By the end, 25 people lost their lives. Salem left us a stark lesson on how quickly hysteria and greed can rip a community apart. This was just the beginning. Jump to the mid-19th century and a new form of bounty emerges. The fugitive slave laws effectively turned everyday folks into bounty hunters. These laws offered financial incentives to anyone who captured a person suspected of being an escaped slave. Even if an enslaved person reached a free state, they could be forced back into bondage. And federal commissioners got paid more if they ruled in favor of an enslaver, obviously creating a blatant conflict of interest. This arrangement incentivized corruption from top to bottom. People who might otherwise have looked the other way suddenly had dollar signs in their eyes. Courts sometimes didn't require much proof at all. This ushered in an era where entire communities got dragged into moral and legal turmoil. With the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, you weren't just discouraged to look the other way. You could be punished if you refused to help apprehend someone. Imagine being a free black American, always having to look over your shoulder in case someone decided to cash in by claiming you were a runaway. Free states grappled with moral outrage, while slaveholding states leveraged these laws to maintain their economic system. It was a nationwide pressure cooker that eventually helped spark the Civil War. Even that brutal era didn't break the cycle of fear, division, and government overreach. Fast forward to the early 20th century and we see the same script playing out in a whole new moral crusade, the nationwide ban on alcohol, the Prohibition. Organized crime flourished, but smaller operations lived in constant fear of neighborly betrayal. The government dangled cash rewards to citizens who'd squeal on local moonshiners or speakeasies. This obviously didn't just target the big fish, it especially hurt small mom-and-pop operations. Paranoia skyrocketed, best friends doubted each other, and long-standing community bonds were severed because, for a fee, you could turn in your buddy's hidden stash of liquor. While law enforcement obviously took its cut, big-time gangsters like Al Capone managed to evade serious repercussions for years by paying off officials. Meanwhile, average folks caught in the crossfire were left unprotected from false accusations or personal vendettas. Prohibition ended not because a moral revelation swept the country, but because of the policy's unintended consequences: rising crime, corrupt officials, and devastated families. Each time, we swear we've learned our lesson. Each time, it seems we haven't. If you're thinking it seems like America's government might have a problem with history repeating itself, consider this: Texas. It's now 2021, and the Lone Star State has passed Senate Bill 8, banning most abortions after 6 weeks, often before a woman even knows she's pregnant, but they aren't relying on cops and courts to enforce it. They deputized everyone. Any private citizen, friend or foe, could file a lawsuit against anyone who aided or abetted an abortion in Texas.
They can use Texas courts to sue not only a doctor who does an abortion, but anybody who works in any capacity at a clinic where an abortion is provided, anybody who drives you to the clinic for your appointment, including a taxi driver or an Uber driver, a rape counselor who advises you on your options, a religious advisor, a priest, somebody in your faith who talks with you about your decision, anybody who loans you money for the procedure, somebody who gives you a place to sleep in town.
The result? A bounty system that has turned neighbors into watchdogs, all for a shot at a hefty payday. Some folks hail it as a pro-life triumph.
Our Creator endowed us with the right to life, and yet millions of children lose their right to life every year because of abortion. In Texas, we work to save those lives.
Others call it a dystopian fiasco that's sowing dangerous fear and mistrust. Then there's Missouri. In December 2024, State Senator-elect David Gregory introduced Senate Bill 78, this time targeting undocumented immigrants. For $1,000, anyone could report someone they believed to be an illegal immigrant.
Senator-elect David Gregory is sponsoring Senate Bill 72. Gregory's bill wants to pay Missourians $1,000 to find and detain illegal immigrants in the state.
Turn in undocumented immigrants. We are talking about Senate Bill 72. We're going to break it down for you. It would create an online portal for the public to report undocumented immigrants to the state's highway patrol. If that call or, say, message leads to an arrest, that person who notified authorities would be eligible for a $1,000 reward. SB 72 would also create a Missouri Illegal Alien Certified Bounty Hunter program, allowing everyday citizens to become bounty hunters for immigrants without the proper documents. Funding would come from the state, and immigration attorneys are already raising red flags.
Gregory said his bill would allow Missouri law enforcement agencies to have better cooperation with the nation's Immigration and Customs Enforcement, also known as ICE. He claims he was just giving cops the tools to do their jobs. Now we turn to Florida. Inspired by Texas's abortion bounty approach, Florida lawmakers are flirting with the idea of a similar policy. A bill allowing citizens to sue people who provide or enable abortions has been introduced in the form of House Bill 16, filed by Republican Webster Barnaby of Volusia County. Barnaby's bill doesn't have any criminal sanctions, leaving enforcement to private citizens who only need to suspect an abortion occurred. They could take medical providers to court, and as a reward, they could receive court-ordered judgments of $10,000 per case. Can you see the pattern? If politicians can harness the public's moral fervor and dangle a bit of cash in front of them, they've got a ready-made enforcement mafia. No official badges are necessary, just the promise of a payout and a sense of righteous purpose. Together, these laws signal a stark shift in how state governments handle controversial issues. Don't just legislate, monetize, turning vigilante policing into a gig economy.
We can't stop it, but we're going to. I've made it known. If I win, they're going back.
You might think government-driven snitch lines are nothing but political scare tactics, but as states like Missouri and Texas roll out hotlines and tip apps, it's clear these immigration bounty programs are more than just rhetoric. They are encouraging anyone to just point a finger at someone who looks illegal, and they're making it easy. States like Missouri and Texas have dedicated channels citizens can use to report who they believe are unusual suspects, like web portals, 1-800 numbers, even smartphone apps, inviting anyone to submit tips on suspected citizens. Local or state authorities review each report, and if it seems remotely credible, it's time for them to act. When immigrants are involved, they ping Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. From there, a chain reaction ensues. Background checks, cross-referencing of immigration databases, and sometimes direct raids on the addresses provided. All for a tip that might be driven by personal grudges or plain ignorance. If an arrest follows from a tip, a reward is paid out. These financial incentives essentially recruit entire neighborhoods into becoming a shadow surveillance network. Residents become convinced they're doing their civic duty by snooping around. These folks have zero training in investigation, de-escalation, or legal standards. The results can be dangerous.
This stemming from a local case where a man was fatally shot in his Palm Springs home in 2021 by someone working as a bounty hunter.
And if the tipster chooses anonymity, there's little recourse for the accused, even if the tip was nothing but spiteful lies. And political messaging feeds this machine.
Every day, Americans are dying.
From fiery campaign ads to sensational media coverage, the public is bombarded with ominous warnings about illegals.
Our borders, they come by the millions and millions and millions. They come from mental institutions. They come from jails, prisoners. Some of the toughest, meanest people you'll ever see.
It's a classic psyops. Ramp up anxiety, then dangle a financial reward to justify turning that anxiety into action. The result? A culture where everyone's a potential target, including legal immigrants, because once suspicion is profitable, facts take a backseat.
You're going to have some Puerto Rican walking down the street, gets tackled, and people are going to be like, we caught one. And they don't know that Puerto Ricans are Americans.
But what happens when these systems fail? When false reporting destroys reputations or an overzealous tip ends with a terrified family ripped apart? The ugly truth is, it's already happening, and there's no sugarcoating what I'm about to share.
These tents held almost 4,000 children earlier this spring. These, the notorious cubicles the migrants call iceboxes. Journalists haven't been allowed to speak to children inside to tell their stories.
Are you feeling a knot in your stomach like I am? This isn't just paranoia or fear-mongering, it's real life, playing out in broad daylight for everyone with eyes to see. Legal, undocumented, it doesn't matter. Once the state sets the bounty laws in motion, any neighbor could morph into a wannabe vigilante looking for a quick payday, and any phone call could rip a family's world apart. Imagine a hard-working family in California just trying to keep a roof over their heads. Their landlord decides they want to raise the rent, but can't due to the lease agreement. So he dials a hotline and threatens the tenants that he'll report them to ICE if they don't move out. Terrified, a family ends up fleeing in the dead of night. Kids ripped from school, jobs lost, and families left homeless. Advocacy groups might protest and say, that's illegal under California's Immigrant Tenant Protection Act, but the damage is already done. One phone call, one cowardly move was all it took to shatter their entire future. Imagine an infant becomes seriously ill. In a normal world, the parents would head straight to the hospital, no questions asked. But in some immigrant communities, fear of being reported looms so large that parents skip the ER entirely.
Now to some breaking news. Texas Governor Greg Abbott issued an executive order Thursday requiring hospitals to ask patients their immigration status.
Even if reporting isn't required, parents are forced to decide between risking freedom and life-saving measures. Many families avoid medical care altogether. Schools experience the same. Enrollment drops because parents don't want to leave a paper trail. Teachers notice empty seats while local officials scratch their heads, wondering why test scores and attendance are spiraling. And it's not just paranoia if bounty hunters are literally being paid to sniff children out. With money on the line, do you really think anyone is going to wait for airtight proof? Ordinary folks, hopped up on YouTube tutorials and constant bombardment of stories by media hailing the downfall of America due to immigrants, are being given the chance to play bounty hunter. Maybe they stop someone in the grocery store parking lot demanding proof of immigration status. Maybe they chase down a truckload of workers because they look illegal. Emboldened by the prospect of a sweet payout, these amateur enforcers spark confrontations and sometimes brutal violence. And it's not just illegals who are at risk. Once suspicion is profitable, even legal immigrants can get caught in the crosshairs. Are we really safer or just more divided? And if you think it can't get worse, these policies are rewiring our institutions in ways we're only beginning to grasp. In neighborhoods across Texas, Missouri, and beyond, we could see entire communities unravel thanks to bounty-driven laws. Folks who used to greet each other on the sidewalk now walk the other way, fearful that a single phone call could put them and/or their families on the hook for thousands of dollars or on ICE's radar. That rift hits hardest in minority communities. It's no secret that Latino neighborhoods in particular face disproportionate scrutiny. People are being reported on nothing more than speaking Spanish or looking foreign. Economically, entire industries are taking a hit. Agriculture, construction, and hospitality depend heavily on migrant workers. When the risk of being bounty hunted becomes a reality, workers say they would rather pack up and leave than risk being turned over to ICE, leaving industries suffering with even more severe labor shortages.
You get rid of half the people who are working to pick our crops and bring vegetables and fruits to market, prices will get more expensive. If you think about how hard it is to build homes and why housing is so expensive, and you get rid of the roofers and other key workers in the construction industry, it is going to get more expensive to build homes. And then you think of the fact that if you get rid of 4% of the population who have massive buying power, you're talking about 11 million people, about 13 million people who collectively have about $250 billion a year that they inject into this economy. That will have devastating impacts on Americans of all stripes.
Jeremy Robbins, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Major.
The ripple effects don't end with those who leave. They land squarely on everyone left behind, footing higher bills and scrambling to fill labor shortages. But what about law enforcement? Let's just say it's complicated. When immigrant families stop trusting the police, entire areas go dark in terms of crime reporting. Domestic violence victims stay silent, worried that one 911 call could lead to deportation instead of protection.
Battered immigrants married to U.S. citizens often fear deportation or losing custody of their children, so they avoid reporting or seeking help for domestic violence.
Officers admit they're finding it harder to do their jobs effectively, lamenting a rise in silent victims. You can't protect a community that's too scared to talk to you. Then there's a deportation machine. Families ripped apart in the blink of an eye. Parents disappear, leaving their kids to bounce between relatives or end up in foster care. Economic hardship follows deportees like a shadow, and some face threats to their safety if they're forced back to unstable regions.
The plan includes conducting the largest mass deportation program in U.S. history. Trump and his team have also vowed to end birthright citizenship.
And the US will need to face the staggering costs of mass deportations, overloaded courts, packed detention centers, and billions spent.
Welcome back to America Decides. A recent report from the American Immigration Council found that mass deportations, as proposed by the incoming Trump administration, could have massive effects on the federal budget and possible damaging effects to the U.S. economy. This report found that a one-time operation to deport all undocumented immigrants in the United States could cost as much, or at least, $315 billion. Nevertheless, President-elect Trump believes the country, in his words, doesn't have a choice.
And in Trump's proposals to end birthright citizenship and chip away at the DACA protections, you have countless children who will be trapped in limbo, haunted by an uncertain future.
Let me ask you about some of your other promises on this topic. You've promised to end birthright citizenship on day one. Is that still your plan?
Yeah, absolutely.
Which brings us to the question no one in power seems to want to answer. If trust is gone and communities are divided, what kind of society are we creating? Because this level of suspicion doesn't just vanish, it burrows deeper into daily life, feeding political divides and cultural resentments. The darkest part? We've walked this path before, and each time we paid a steep price. One has to wonder, are we really prepared to pay it again? Look at the big picture, and you'll notice a systematic campaign to breed fear and paranoia because a divided, suspicious populace is a compliant one. Once you normalize snitching on your neighbor for a quick payday, you're not just targeting one community, you're laying the groundwork for a broader culture of constant surveillance. Soon it's not just about immigration. Maybe next month it's unpaid taxes or unapproved political speech, because let's be honest, fear and suspicion are powerful tools in the hands of those looking to tighten their grip on society. You've seen the same strategy in authoritarian regimes. Nazi Germany, Stalinist Russia, Fascist Italy, they've thrived on making citizens fear each other more than the government itself. It's no coincidence. When you're worried that a friend, coworker, or even family member might cash in by reporting you, you stop questioning the bigger forces at work. You become isolated, vulnerable, and easy to control. That's exactly what these immigration bounties set in motion. Today, it's about illegals, a term designed to stoke fear and anger. Tomorrow, it might be about questioning government spending or criticizing certain policies. We've already lived through the Patriot Act era, where temporary measures to protect national security evolved into widespread data gathering and indefinite surveillance. This bounty system is the next rung on that ladder, encouraging everyday people to police each other while those in power watch on from high up, quietly reaping the benefits of a population too paranoid to unite against them. Legal challenges may pop up, led by civil rights groups questioning the constitutionality of these bounty laws, but consider how often courts ultimately yield to the nebulous promise of safety. The government and private entities see just how easy it is to harness suspicion for profit or political gain. Why not offer a reward for reporting anyone who misuses social benefits, or neighbors suspected of un-American activities? The leap from immigration bounties to a fully fledged surveillance state is shorter than we may think. Are we willing to pay this price for so-called security? Do you think these policies are truly about immigration enforcement, or are they about power, fear, and turning citizens into informants? It's a slow bleed of our humanity, and by the time we notice what's happening, will it be too late? As history shows, once a society surrenders to paranoia, returning to trust and unity is an uphill battle, one we might never win if we don't wake up now. And just as chilling as it sounds, the worst part is how quickly we'll do it ourselves if someone dangles the right incentive and sense of purpose in front of us. And yes, there are supporters of mass deportations.
A new poll reveals that more than 54% of Americans support mass deportations of undocumented migrants. The Scripps News Ipsos poll found that includes 86% of Republicans, 25% of Democrats, and 58% of independents.
Some citizens see immigration bounty programs as a necessary line of defense, an answer to everything from rising crime to economic strain. They'll tell you that undocumented immigrants are behind staggering arrest rates, citing ICE data that shows tens of thousands of undocumented people picked up on criminal charges.
A letter from U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement sent to Texas Republican Representative Tony Gonzalez revealed the agency is tracking hundreds of thousands of immigrants with criminal records that have been released into U.S. communities. Data from ICE shows that as of July 2024, there are nearly 650,000 non-citizens with criminal histories listed as non-detained. Of those, over 425,000 have criminal convictions and over 220,000 have pending charges. More than 13,000 have been convicted of homicide and almost 16,000 were convicted of sexual assault. Official figures indicate many of them have been in the U.S. for years, possibly decades. In August 2016, there were over 360,000 convicted criminals in the agency's non-detained docket. In June 2021, there were more than 400,000 convicted criminals in ICE's non-detained docket. According to ICE, some of those categorized as non-detained are in federal or state custody, serving criminal sentences, and are likely to be arrested by the agency. The letter also stated that most non-citizens convicted of homicide are typically not eligible for release from ICE custody.
They'll warn of cartels and claim these organizations thrive on weak borders. From their angle, heightened enforcement and even bounty payments help drive out bad actors and restore law and order. Groups like the Federation for American Immigration Reform claim undocumented immigrants cost taxpayers over $100 billion a year in education, healthcare, and law enforcement.
Immigration. For decades, America has had the highest levels in our history, higher than any other country. The result, most new American jobs have gone to immigrants. American workers are undervalued, losing out to cheap foreign labor. Wages have stagnated, while the national debt has skyrocketed. Mass immigration has jammed our schools, hospitals, and highways. Maybe it's time to phase down immigration so we can phase Americans back in. Paid for by Federation for American Immigration Reform.
They argue deportation policies save American jobs, preventing wages from nosediving under competition from low-cost immigrant labor. Toss in record-breaking border encounters, and you've got people convinced the country is on the brink of chaos. These voices see bounty programs not as acts of paranoia, but as a patriotic stand against a tidal wave of illegal immigrants' drain on America. They ask, if we don't stand guard, who will? Ultimately, everyone claims to defend America. The question is, at what cost and for whom? We've seen how immigration bounties, abortion tip lines, and vigilante-style reporting can tear neighbors apart, all under the banner of American safety. When lawmakers turn citizens against each other, they sidestep the political process itself. That's how dictatorships have always taken root and thrived, by building webs of informants, stoking paranoia, and smothering the voices that might otherwise demand change. If you think these laws cross a line, don't sit in silence. Find your representative, ask questions, and demand accountability. When trust becomes a commodity and fear becomes currency, the soul of a community is at stake. If you found this video eye-opening, check out our next video right here. Don't forget to subscribe for more insights into the forces shaping our world.